So on this video podcast, I want to talk about the governor's possible actions on bills that reach the governor's desk. Most people are familiar that when a bill is passed by the legislature and sent to the governor can sign the bill into law and create a statute, or can veto the law and prevent the bill from becoming a statute. In California, there is a third way, which is to allow a bill to become law without the governor's signature. We affectionately call that a pocket signature. And these three options are made available to the governor pursuant to the California Constitution. Specifically, they're found in the legislative section, which is Article 4, and this stuff is in Section 10. So let's talk in detail about signatures, vetoes, and bills becoming law without a signature. First is signature by the governor. In Section 10A, it provides in part that each bill passed by the legislature shall be presented to the governor. It becomes a statute if it is signed by the governor. So in general, the governor has 12 days in which to act on a bill that was sent to the governor's desk by the legislature. Note that the 12-day period begins once the bill has been presented to the governor. So not the day that it passed the Senate or Assembly, not the day that it goes into engrossing or enrolling, the day that it comes out of enrollment and is presented to the governor. So this 12-day signing period is applicable to all bills that are presented to the governor 12 or more days prior to the date that the legislature is going to adjourn for either a joint recess in the first year of the 2-year session, which is the odd numbered year, or roughly on or before August 20th in the second year of the 2-year session, the even numbered year, because then the legislature has to adjourn by August 31st, except for a couple of specified types of bills that can be considered after August 31. The applicable calendar date in the first year is based on the date that the two houses of the legislature consent to adjourn for their interim recess. It's subject to change. That date is set forth in the joint rules of the Assembly and the Senate. In Section 10B2 of Article 4, it says that any bill passed by the legislature before September 1 of the second calendar year of the biennium of the legislative session and in the possession of the governor on or after September 1 that is not returned on or before September 30th of that year becomes a statute. So again, in the second even numbered year of the 2-year legislative session, the governor has to act on all the bills no later than midnight on September 30th. The recess date, August 31, generally in the second year, again, is fixed by the state constitution. When the governor approves a bill, that is, the governor signs the measure, dates it, and deposits it with the Secretary of State, and then it becomes the official record and law of the state. The Secretary of State does a mechanical duty of assigning the bill a bill number, which is known as the chapter number of the bill. And the bills are numbered consecutively in the order in which they are received by the Secretary of State from the governor's office. And there's only one sequence of chapter numbers maintained for each year of that 2-year session. As a result, the numbers do not continue into the second year of the session. Also, there's a separate set of chapter numbers that are maintained for a special session, as well as for resolutions that are passed by the two houses, which are joint and concurrent resolutions. So the individual house resolutions do not receive a chapter number by the Secretary of State. The second possible action, of course, is a veto by the governor. And Section 10A of Article 4 provides in part that the governor may veto a bill by returning it with any objections to the bill's House of Origin. And then the House of Origin has to enter the governor's objections, which we affectionately call the veto message, in the daily journal for the House of Origin. And then they can proceed to reconsider it. Each house would have to pass the bill by roll call vote, 2/3 of the membership concurring, in order to override the governor's veto and for that vetoed bill to then become a statute. When the governor vetoes a bill, the governor returns it with his or her objections to the House of Origin. Okay, so we call those objections the veto message. And the House of Origin can consider the veto immediately or place it on an unfinished business file. Pursuant to the joint rules, the legislature has 60 calendar days to act upon the vetoed bill. And if no action is taken during that time, then the measure is struck from the file and the veto is fully effective. When the legislature overrides a governor's veto, the bill or even the items of appropriation are basically authenticated by the legislature as having become law by a certificate attached to the vetoed bill. And then that bill or statement that's been authenticated is delivered to the governor, and which is required by the governor to be deposited with the laws in the office of the Secretary of State. And of course, those overridden bills are then enacted and they're filed with the Secretary of State and given a chapter number in the same manner as bills signed or approved by the governor. Let me make a side note on vetoes by briefly mentioning the line item veto. In section 10E of Article 4, it says that the governor may reduce or eliminate one or more items of appropriation while approving other portions of a bill. Here, the governor has to append to the bill a statement of items reduced or eliminated with the reasons for his action. So it's just like a regular veto. Basically, a veto message goes along with the fiscal line item veto, and the governor transmits those messages to the House of Origin with a copy of the governor's statements for taking that line item veto action. And then the items reduced or eliminated entirely can be considered, and they can be passed over the governor's veto in the same manner as bills, i.e. a 2/3 vote of both houses. Now, if a bill presented to the governor contains one or several items of appropriation, the governor can eliminate or reduce any or all of those items and still approve the other portions of the bill. And this is the governor's utilization of his line item veto or item veto. Again, a copy of that statement is transmitted to the House in which the bill originated. The last action that the governor can take, of course, is to allow a bill to become law without the governor's signature. And here we find in section 10B1 that any bill other than a bill which would establish or change boundaries of a legislative, congressional, or other election district, or passed by the legislature on or before the date the legislature adjourns for a joint recess to reconvene in the second calendar year, and in the possession of the governor after that period, that is not returned within 30 days after that date becomes a statute. Otherwise, remember the 12-day rule for action, which is applicable at all times except at the very end of session. Section 10B3 of Article 4 says, any other bill presented to the governor that is not returned within 12 days becomes a statute. So again, California has a pocket signature rule, so that if the governor does not act on the measure within the allotted time, then that bill becomes law without the governor's signature.